I first want to welcome you to Judy's Room. This is for May 2025. And it is an absolute blessing to have Myra come and share from her firsthand experiences and journey, and really what it was like in the history of the cross disability advocacy work that she's done. And I know she's going to give a wonderful presentation. Normally, I would say, Susan, from I Love You Lead On, would you like to introduce your organization? But she's not here, and we're a little surprised. So, I Love You Lead On does normally do these with us. And so, Mind Freedom came together with I Love You Lead On during the pandemic, and did a series of webinars that became Judy's Room with Mind Freedom around the history of the movement and Judy Chamberlain. And that's how the name got adapted. And so um, since then, they had been doing them in partnership. And I feel like now more than ever, the cross disability um, communities have to come together and really advocate for unity, because we're all getting everything cut from us right now. So we need to unify our voices now more than ever. But I am going to share with you very quickly what our mission is, because I've actually shared it several times. I gave two workshops, and it was kind of interesting. Uh, there was a one group of individuals that I got to share what Mind Freedom was for the first time and introduce them to the movement as a whole. And there was also a lot of people that were really excited to see our pamphlets back out there, and really kind of getting the dialogues going again. But I'm gonna just, our mission statement is Mind Freedom leads a nonviolent transformation, transformational, championing human rights and options in mental health care, uniting psych survivors, consumers, allies for movements for justice everywhere. And I can absolutely tell you that that was the dialogue about a great need for advocacy, but even more activism. And there's nobody better than Myra that can share with us what some of that activism looked like, that we need to return to the roots of, as we were actually talking about activism theater. That's something that has not been done enough. So I'm going to just quickly read Myra's bio. Myra is a passionate uh, movement activist and international disabilities leader with for the consumer, survivor, ex-patient movement, the human for human rights with persons with disability and psych survivors. She played a key role in developing the United Nations Conventions on the Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, as a representative of Mind Freedom International and a member of the International Disability Caucus. She has worked with several rights organizations, the Network Factor International, the Network of Women with Disabilities, and has actively worked on to educate others on CRPD and all that it implies, especially concerning legal capacity, autonomy, and the rights to freedom from forced treatment. Her advocacy extends over various platforms, including the United Nations, and we are overjoyed to have her. And I'm also going to share that she is one of our newest Mind Freedom board members. It is an honor to introduce our newest board freedom board member, Myra Kovary. Thank you, Myra. Take it away. I'll get your power.
Thank you. Thank you, KK, and thank you, Mind Freedom, and thank you all the hard work that's gone into building this organization over all these years. And since I see David is here, I'm going to especially call him out for having dreamed up the whole thing in the first place. And still, still at it, David. Thank you. It's an honor that you are here. I appreciate that. Um, let's see. I made this PowerPoint presentation. KK is going to share the screen, and I'm going to say next slide, please, to turn the pages. But before we go, I call this CRPD 101, which is Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 101. So it's an introduction to the convention. And my other title for today is The Revolution Has Begun. So it's a big topic, and I'm going to try to be as brief as possible because I want to leave as much time as at the end as possible for questions. Um, so the background, I need to explain a few acronyms. UN stands for United Nations, and the negotiations of the text, I think formally, and I wasn't there at the beginning, so don't quote me on this, please, but I think formally they started in 2001. I got involved in 2002. The text was adopted in 2006, and then it was open for signing. And under UN regulations, 20 countries have to um, ratify the treaty before it enters into force. So it entered into force in May of 2008 and is a side issue, but I volunteered and had the pleasure of being invited to play my harp. I'm a classical harpist in another life, and I had the pleasure of being invited to play at the celebration of the entry into force in the General Assembly Hall. It was quite a moment for me. Um, ECOSOC status means I think it's the Economic and Social Council at the UN. It's the status that Mind Freedom has as a legit organization. We call, at the UN, they're called NGOs in the US, not for profits, but at the UN, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And with help from David, Kate Millett pled the case at the UN and got the ECOSOC status for Mind Freedom. And I don't know exactly when that happened, but it was definitely before 2001. So CRPD, as KK said, is the acronym for Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. IDA is the International Disability Alliance, which was in existence prior to the negotiations of the text of the CRPD. And World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, which is WNUSP, was a member and still is a member of IDA, the International Disability Alliance. So out of all that grew something called the International Disability Caucus. And I personally was not involved in the development of the caucus itself. So I don't have that history, but it was, instead of IDA doing the negotiations, we made a caucus that was open to, I think there were at times 800 of us at the UN. It was of people with every disability imaginable. It was incredibly exciting to be there and meet so many fantastic activists with, as I said, every disability imaginable from all over the world, cross every culture, cross economic status, cross gender, cross race, cross, everything that divides us. We all came together there. It was incredibly exciting. So the IDC, the International Disability Caucus, came about under IDA. And MFI, this is hearsay on my part. I wasn't involved in this, but MFI at the time under Celia Brown's leadership wanted to have a separate mental health caucus. And that a decision was made not to go in that direction, to hold the cross disability movement together without us splitting off. And it turned out that was a very wise decision. So the whole world came together at the UN during these negotiations, because they didn't no, there was not a country in the world that didn't wish to be seen, that everyone came together in its wish not to be seen as discriminating against people with disabilities or persons with disabilities. The initials for that are PWDs. We call ourselves PWDs, or the organization of IDA organizations that belong to IDA were called DPOs, Disabled People's Organization. And IDA consisted of the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, landmine survivors, I think at the time, World Federation for the Deaf, World Federation for the Deafblind. On um, I don't want to pretend to name them all, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but it was a phenomenal um, coalition of cross-disability activists. And what made this whole thing possible at the UN was civil society's involvement. So the governments very early on realized that they simply could not um, develop a convention, which is the way that all conventions have been developed up until the CRPD. The governments are the only ones who have input into the text of the convention. But they realized, because of pressure from IDA, that they couldn't do this without us. So nothing about us without us became the motto of the International Disability Rights Movement. And so it's because of civil society's involvement that that's what made the negotiation different from all others in the past, and that's why we were successful. And the US and plenty of other governments were opposing having civil society be able to speak on the floor. But the European Union in was very much on our side because of the International Disability Alliance's connections in Europe, and also the government of New Zealand was incredibly helpful behind the scenes. So Tina Minkowitz from World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry led the team of users and survivors. There were, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 of us from all over the world over that period of 7 or 8 years. I affectionately called us the Dream Team. But World Network really led the charge with Tina as the co-chair of the World Network. And Tina also took on a very significant leadership role with the International Disability Caucus. So she deserves an incredible amount of credit for what we accomplished. I would like to talk a little bit about MFI's role. Judy Chamberlain spoke, although I was not there at the time, and I heard that she got a standing ovation. I spoke from the peanut gallery, I would call it, as a civil society representative, telling my story of having been locked up, been put in seclusion, tackled by 4 men, pants pulled down, injected, and locked in with no access to the bathroom, urinating all over myself. And I I ended by saying that in our country, we wouldn't even treat a dog like that. And the government people were shuffling their papers and not interested in what civil society had to say. But as I was speaking, I noticed that all the heads turned to listen to me. All the heads turned toward me. And it was an incredible moment, like they were on swivels, everybody put their noses out of their papers and turned. And it's a moment I'll never forget. And I'm very grateful to MFI for making that possible for me. And Celia Brown is the one who made it possible for me to actually speak that day. I also made a formal intervention. Intervention is UN lingo for speaking on the floor. I made a formal intervention on behalf of the International Disability Caucus on the right to liberty, which I'll get to in the slides, Article 14. MFI held a very successful side event that was I'm going to take credit for was my idea to do to have the side event, to do a role play where I let one of the other MFI members play psychiatrist and tie me up and pretend I was in a straitjacket. And um, I think it was very powerful. Um, Kate Millett read from her book, The Looney Bin Trip, during that side event. And I also issued press releases on behalf of MFI. I got a lot of people to come to the side event, standing at the door, uh, at the exit of the UN room and handing out flyers just prior to the event. I was very much involved on the floor, and it was an incredible experience. Kate Millett spoke on torture on behalf of the International Disability Caucus, which is Article 15, I'll get to in the slides. And she read a poem that she had written, which I got posted on MFI's website if anyone's interested in it. It's very, very powerful, talking about being medicated against one's will. John McCarthy, who is unfortunate, well, Kate is no longer alive, Judy is no longer alive, and neither is John McCarthy. From Ireland. Some of you may remember him. He paraded around the room of the 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 conference room that we were meeting in, doing the Thorazine shuffle. Um, he wanted to do it on behalf of the International Disability Caucus, but the Disability Caucus didn't want this kind of behavior at the UN. We didn't want to push our luck with, having kind of street theater on the scene there. But he befriended the government of Vanuatu because their delegation was headed by the brother of Diego Maradona, and Maradona is a big soccer star in Latin America, and John recognized the name and made friends with him. The brother is a person with a disability and was representing the government of Vanuatu, which is an island in the middle of the Pacific, and didn't have money to send a delegation to the UN. So John made friends with them and sat with them, with Vanuatu, with their flag, their country flag. And when Vanuatu was called on by the chair, John got up and walked around the room doing the Thorazine shuffle to explain what it was like to be medicated against one's will. In December 2006, the text was adopted. And as we were leaving the building, standing by the elevator, I remember declaring proudly to Tina and Kate and whoever else was there that the revolution has begun. So I'm very excited about this. Let's go ahead with the PowerPoint. KK, please. I would like to say before we start with the slides that we did not succeed in getting an explicit, absolute prohibition of involuntary psychiatric interventions. But the reason that we won is because the governments weren't really able to connect the dots that we were able to connect. And I'm going to explain this connect the dots now. So it's a little bit complicated. Bear with me, please. But when we connect the dots, we got everything that we needed in order to put an end to involuntary psychiatry under international law. Okay, let's start with the slides, please. KK, can I see them? Yes. Okay, so in honor of our brothers and sisters who did not survive their experience of psychiatry, I would like to talk more about the convention. So the next slide, please. There's a photograph, which I hope came through. Yes, of the UN ad hoc committee meetings on the CRPD in the UN. It's conference room number 4. And the photo was taken by Tom Olin, so it gives you some idea of what the environment was like there. And accessibility, wheelchair accessibility, it was an experience. It was amazing. The UN was not used to having 800 people with disabilities in a meeting, but they did their best, and it worked out. Next slide, please. The key principles of the CRPD is that it's a human rights approach. It's based on non-discrimination. And autonomy and the freedom to make one's own choices is the underlying principles of the whole convention. Next slide, please. The social model of disability transcends the old medical welfare model. Uh, I guess I could say that the old model was sort of one of pity and of charity. You know, we feel sorry for these people with disabilities. So the CRPD supersedes that paternalistic approach that had been expressed in the outdated UN MI principles. It's called the Principles for the Protection of Persons with Mental Illness and the Improvement of Mental Health Care. That's officially its name, but they're called the MI principles or mental illness principles. They were adopted in 1991, and also the old stuff under the Inter-American Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against persons with disabilities in 1999. So this 2006 document is a big breakthrough. Next page, next slide, please. The CRPD versus MI principles. The CRPD respects all the human rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities on an equal basis with others. And that is the key to why we succeeded, because we were in alliance with all other people with all other people with all other disabilities. And there was no way we knew that we had a chance during these negotiations because there was no way that they could make a human rights treaty that discriminated against us, had different rules for us than for every other person with a disability. But it took an incredible effort to educate people about our issues because, as we all know, we're sort of looked down on by everyone in society. So the new CRPD no longer allows for involuntary psychiatric interventions at any time, including in an emergency, including on the basis of dangerousness to self or others, grave disability, or inability to take care of oneself, or whatever wording they come up with. You know, they keep changing it in the US anyway. It's all prohibited. Under the next slide, please. Under the preamble of the convention, I've just highlighted a few of the sub letters that specifically relate to users and survivors of psychiatry. So, uh, subheading E, disability is an evolving concept, and disability results from the interaction between persons with impairments and attitudinal and environmental barriers. So that's a big change from how it used to be. It used to be just about impairments. Um, and the notion that it's an evolving concept is also very significant because disability is never defined in the convention itself on purpose. Um, Subheading H, discrimination against any person on the basis of disability is a violation of the inherent dignity and worth of the human person. So you can see why we felt that that we had a chance to make a difference here, because you can't have a human rights treaty that discriminates against that says everyone else has human rights except people with psychosocial disabilities. And psychosocial disability is, I think I'm going to mention this later, but it's the language that we preferred to describe ourselves as users and survivors of psychiatry when we needed to use the word disability in order to participate in this cross disability work. So many of us don't believe we have disabilities, but um, there was a lot of conversation about how to do this, and like I said, we won. It, it the convention includes persons who need more intensive support. It recognizes the importance of individual autonomy, including the freedom to make our own choices. And it says that persons with disabilities should have the opportunity to be actively involved in decision-making processes about policies and programs. So we've got a big foot in the door here. Let's go through the articles quickly. Article 1, let me see what time it is. Okay, Article 1, next slide, please, KK, is the purpose. The purpose of the convention, and again, I'm pulling out things that specifically relate to um, users and survivors of psychiatry or persons with psychosocial disabilities. As far as we are concerned, these words are interchangeable in the context of the convention. So the purpose of the present convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. I am sorry, I get goosebumps just reading it. It's powerful language. Persons with disabilities include, so this is the closest thing we come to a definition, okay? Persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Next slide, please. So the CRPD definitely includes the rights of persons with long-term mental impairments. And as I said earlier, we did not get the language we preferred, which would have been persons with psychosocial disabilities. They are still talking about mental impairments, but it includes us. There's no way that it doesn't. Um, Article 3, next slide, please. They're under the general principles, and again, I'm picking out things that specifically relate to us. I don't want to go through the entire convention. It's an enormous document. I've about 30 pages, more than. There's an optional protocol also at the end of it, at least 35 pages of text. So I've tried to pull out the things that are most important for us. Under Article 3, uh, General Principle A, autonomy and freedom to make one's own choices. B, non-discrimination. And D, respect for difference and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity. Next slide, please. Article 4, the general obligations include 1B, to abolish existing laws that constitute discrimination. Well, it's not happening yet, but it's there on paper. Number 3, development of legislation and policies to implement the convention shall actively involve persons with disabilities through their representative organizations. So we have a foot in the door, as I said before. Next slide, please. The next one is the crux of the entire convention, in my opinion. Article 12. And the lawyer, if there are lawyers here, they're welcome to make comments at the end, please, on this. Article 12 is about equal recognition before the law. And subparagraph 2 says that persons with disabilities enjoy legal capacity on an equal basis with others in all aspects of life. Legal capacity, well, let me just go on here. I'll explain more later. Subparagraph 3, states shall take appropriate measures to provide access by persons with disabilities to the support they may require in exercising their legal capacity. That is huge. So legal capacity is not easy concept. In some parts of the world, legal capacity means the capacity for rights. But in English, it means the capacity to act. And there was a big fight at the very end with the Arab world, the Russians and the Chinese, who wanted their translation to hold in the in the text, and they had a footnote that they want that indicated that, and there's never been a footnote in a convention. So Tina led the charge on our behalf to get that out of there, because the whole point of that was that people with so-called mental impairments, couldn't exercise their legal capacity. So We won on that also. Next slide, please. The paradigm shift. This is the key, again, to the entire convention, in my opinion. It's about capacity versus incapacity. So we now focus on what a person is capable of doing instead of what a person is not capable of doing. And we have respect for a person's autonomy and the right to make our own decisions. And a person is responsible for the consequences of those decisions. So that includes no more insanity defense. Um, Models of support include families, peer support, community support, um, the kinds of supports that indigenous cultures provide for each other, for themselves, advanced planning, advanced directives, personal ombudsman program in Sweden. There's a program that was very successful for a time, and Mats Jespersen spoke on behalf of World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry about it, and people understood that it was possible to actually have support, to actually support people who had very high support needs, personal assistance, and on and on. And this is going to evolve over time, this whole notion of how to provide support. And Tina Minkowitz has written a new book on reimagining crisis support that she wrote relatively recently within the last few years. And I haven't read every word of that carefully, but we're all still working on this. The next slide, please. Yes, supported decision making versus substituted decision making. So support models encompass substitutions because 100% support could be needed for a person if they're in a coma, for example, and can't communicate at all. But substitution models cannot encompass a full range of support. So substitution is like law guardians and healthcare proxy agents and um, representative payees and um, people who just guardians in general. It's that system is substituted decision making. So this is now being replaced by under the convention, states are required to provide support. So even if 100% support is required, there's an obligation, though, to find out what the person wants instead of acting in their best interest, which is the old model, and to back off as the support need is reduced instead of making the person go to court to establish competency. Next page, please. Next slide, Article 14. Another very key article in the convention is the right to liberty on an equal basis with others. What it says in that article is that the existence of a disability shall in no case justify a deprivation of liberty. So what we wanted was that there could be no deprivation of liberty on the basis of disability, but other governments wouldn't go for that. So we compromised on this, but we knew, even though they thought they had a way around it, that they could still lock us up against our wills if we were dangerous to self or others or whatever. They thought they had wiggled wiggle room there, and we knew that they didn't. So we accepted this um, compromise language. Article 15, next slide, please. Freedom from torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. That is a standard article that comes from other conventions as well, but what's new in the convention is that it provides protection on an equal basis with others. So it's something like, I don't have it in, I do have it in front of me. The article itself, Article 15 says no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, or punishment. In particular, no one shall be subjected without his or her free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. So that is already in some other convention, I think the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that's where that language came from. But what's new in our convention is that it's now we have protection on an equal basis with others. So, for example, forcing mind altering drugs on political prisoners is considered to be torture, but somehow forcing mind altering drugs on persons with psychosocial disabilities is considered healthcare and treatment. Well, not anymore. Next slide, please. Article 17. This was a complex article at first. Respect for physical and mental integrity on an equal basis with others. This is the article where we tried to get an explicit ban on forced psychiatric interventions. We lost. They wanted language that said that there was equal, the respect for physical and mental integrity um, was on an equal basis with others, except under exceptional circumstances with appropriate legal safeguards. Well, we screamed bloody murder and we got that out of there. So the article is very, very brief. It doesn't have precedent under international law. And all it says is every person with disabilities has a right to respect for his or her physical and mental integrity on an equal basis with others. So it's not as emotionally, it's very powerful to me, but legally it doesn't have the same power as Articles 12 and 14 and 15. Next slide, please. Article 19, living independently and being included in the community. I don't think I need to read the rest of this. It's pretty self-explanatory, but that people have a right to choose their place of residence, and including having support services, in-home services. Next slide, please. Article 12 is respect for privacy, that our health records are protected on an equal basis with others. And for me, that was particularly loaded because I lost custody of my two children on the basis of my mental health diagnosis, and my mental health records were subpoenaed by the family court. So, under this Article 22, that can't happen, I don't think. But I don't know that it's been tested anywhere yet. Next slide, please. Article 23, respect for home and the family. Persons with disabilities, including children, retain their fertility on an equal basis with others. That's huge. There's a lot of forced abortion and forced sterilization in our community and among users and survivors of psychiatry. And then subparagraph 4, in no case shall a child be separated from parents on the basis of disability of either the child or one or both of the parents. That is huge. I wish that had been the case in my life. Next slide, please. Article 25, health. Subparagraph C is the right to health care on the basis of free and informed consent. Well, as you all know, that's not how things are. Um, Subparagraph D prohibits discrimination in provisions of health insurance and life insurance, and that's also not the case for us currently. Next slide, please. Article 27 about work and employment. The main thing that impacts users and survivors of psychiatry is that the convention requires that the state's parties ensure reasonable accommodation in the workplace. That's theoretically under US law, but as we all know, that's not the way things are in reality. Next slide, please. Article 29, participation in political and public life. We all have a right to vote and to be elected. And next slide, please. Article 32, international cooperation. States have to partner with civil society, in particular with organizations of persons with disabilities. And Mind Freedom International is one of those organizations. So the states are required to partner with us. Next slide, please. Article 33, National Implementation and Monitoring. Persons with disabilities and their representative organizations shall be involved and participate fully in the monitoring process. So that's the articles. The next slide is the Dream Team, a picture of the Dream Team meeting at the UN. Dream Team in quotes, please. The photo was taken by Tom Olin. It's a circle of user survivor activists in a lounge at the UN. And in the photo, I think, are Celia Brown, Janet from MFI, Janet Amagachar from Ghana, Mind Freedom Ghana, Tina Minkowitz from World Network, Daniel Iga and his John McCarthy with the white hair ponytail, Daniel Iga and his wife from ooh, I'm not sure where they're from someplace in Africa. I'm embarrassed. I don't know the country. And and Chris Hansen has her back. There's somebody else that I don't recognize. I'm sorry. Oh, that's with her also in the lower right with her back to us is Amita Danda from India, a lawyer who's a law professor in India with World Network. And right smack in the middle with her back to us is Chris Hansen, who was the government representative from New Zealand. And also the representative of World Network and users and survivors of psychiatry. Chris was very, very important in the negotiations because New Zealand ended up being the secretariat, which means that they were handling all the minutes of the meetings and all the updates and everything that was going on for the UN. And Chris was on the New Zealand delegation, so she played a huge part in this. Next slide, please. Outside the conference room number 4 at the UN is another of Tom Olin's photos. On the left is Kate Millett, Ami Tadanda again in the sari, me seated, and Gabor Gombas from Hungary, who was very involved with mental disability action called MDAC. I'm sorry, I don't know what the initials stand for. Also part of World Network. Next slide, please. The International Disability Caucus, the IDC. The exciting thing was that we built alliances while we were working at the UN. Our struggle is now a shared struggle. And the IDC was made up of over 70 international organizations, including the World Blind Union, the World Federation of the Deaf, the World Federation of the Deaf-Blind, Inclusion International, which represents people with intellectual disabilities, the Landmine Survivors Network, which is no longer in IDA. I don't even think it exists anymore, and the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, Mind Freedom International, and many, many others. As I said, there were sometimes 800 of us in meetings. There are people using wheelchairs, seeing eye dogs, sign language interpreters in every language imaginable. It was a remarkable experience. In conclusion, the next slide, please, KK. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a victory for users and survivors of psychiatry, and there is absolutely nothing in the convention that can be used to restrict our rights. Next slide, please. We succeeded in establishing the legal basis to abolish mental health commitment and forced treatment, guardianship, and the insanity defense, to create a wide range of healing support, and to liberate our people from institutions. I was honored to be part of it. Again, the motto of the International Disability Caucus, nothing about us without us. So I'm going to just quickly wrap up some history. After the CRPD text was adopted in 2006, December 2006, I was involved with the creation of implementation manual on the CRPD on behalf of World Network. CRHUSP, that I pronounce CRUSP, was founded, which I was one of the founding board members. Tina Minkowitz was and still is the president. I'm no longer on the board. Celia Brown of Mind Freedom International also served on Tina's board. And Tina really carried the torch for getting an explicit absolute prohibition of involuntary psychiatric interventions into all the interpretations following the convention. The interpretations that have been made by the CRPD committee is the name of the committee that monitors the convention, and questions governments every year as to how they're complying with the convention and makes recommendations. She's also worked with a special rapporteur on torture and possibly with other special rapporteurs. I hope that Tina will um, be invited. Well, we'll choose to present more information about what she's done, because I'm not up on all the details of that. But she's also been active with the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and even recently, the WHO, the World Health Organization, which is part of the UN, um, came out opposing forced psychiatric intervention. So the WHO statements are a little wishy-washy still, but I think it's remarkable that even the WHO, which is organized by the medical establishment, and David, maybe you'll say something afterwards about your work with the WHO prior to the convention. Um, because David was involved in lobbying a lot, having to do with electroshock, even before the convention. Um, thank you. So let me just finish up, please. I'm really almost done. The there was a ratification in the campaign. A ratification campaign, excuse me, I misspoke. A ratification campaign in the United States during the Obama years. Um, we came close, but we lost by 3 votes, was unsuccessful, and users and survivors of psychiatry were lobbying for ratification with no RUDs. RUDs is the lingo for reservations, declarations, and understandings. And all the governments, all the powerful governments, let me say, in the world have ratified with RUDs, because obviously what we accomplished in the convention is in violation of domestic law in every single country in the world. So they want to protect themselves, and they wanted to ratify the convention. They wanted to be seen as not oppressing people with disabilities. So they all ratified the convention, except the U.S. and I think maybe 2 or 3 other human rights abomination states haven't ratified. We're not in good company. But anyway, most of them have ratified with RUDs. So we were lobbying for ratification without RUDs, knowing, of course, that that was not even possible. But I think ratification is still possible when we get a more receptive administration and receptive Congress again. It will happen someday. And so I'd like to go to questions and answers now. I want to make sure that we left a lot of time for that. I didn't want to talk for too long. So I hope I've explained my enthusiasm for this whole
Yeah.
topic. That's my main goal. I'm not a lawyer. I can't answer legal questions, but I'm thrilled that to have been part of this. I'm very grateful to MFI for allowing me to be a UN rep at that time. It was a very exciting time. And at the very
And
end, I'm just going to wrap up with a thanks. But please, let's go to question and answer. And KK,
well,
please
and what
leave
about
1 minute for
David?
me at the
David,
end.
yep, David was going to chime in. You had asked him where his take was. So, David, if you still are available, we would love to hear from you as well. We're grateful you joined us today.
Thank you. And thanks, Myra. And thanks, Myra. Sorry, I thought you were calling on me before. Sorry, I thought you were calling on me before. I'll just say, We all remember Celia.
I'll just say we all remember Celia.
Those of us met her.
Those of us who met her.
Ah, incredible.
Incredible.
Warmth.
Incredible warmth.
And that actually was Mind Freedom's strategy.
And that was actually Mind Freedom's strategy.
Was just making new friends.
Was just making new friends.
In the disability community.
In the disability community.
And you mentioned a few groups, Myra.
And you mentioned a few groups, Myra.
Certainly, I'd say Tina really helped build this model and supported decision making.
And certainly,
Tina helped build this model of supported
decision making.
You know of any area in the world that has adopted laws to help us?
Do you know of any areas in the world that have adopted laws to help this?
It's coming, David. I hope Tina will talk more about this because she, being a lawyer, has more insight than I do. But in Mexico, they just adopted a new legislation that I think is the termination of guardianship for persons with disabilities. And in Peru, there's something also going on exciting that is about supported decision making. But I'm sorry, I have not been as actively involved as I would have liked to have been since for the last 10 years. So I'm not up on all that, on those details. So I hope Tina's going to come and share because she has a
Isn't
remarkable
it
stories to tell.
isn't it Mexico that actually just abolished guardianship? I believe it was. And so
I,
that's huge if they no longer um have any form of guardianship within that country. What are we doing? Why are we going more towards it? These are conversations we should be having for sure. A really important dialogue. And so I just appreciate so much, Myra, for sharing. David, thank you for all that you've done. Jim has a hand up, and I don't know if anybody else would like to ask some questions or share anything. Please feel free right after Jim.
Thanks, KK and Myra. Fabulous presentation. I'm really glad it's recorded. It may be the best presentation on the CRPD I've ever heard. But what I really wanted to say is I remember when you guys were, trying to get this done, and I didn't think there was a prayer that you were going to be able to do it. And so my hat's off to all you and everyone about getting this done. Of course, now, the trick is to try and get it actually implemented. But I was just flabbergasted that you got it done. I think mainly the governments didn't really understand it. And then as I recall, there was a later clarification that basically said, yes, we mean it. There's no forced psychiatry.
Exactly, Jim. I think they really, I think I said this to you before, but I think we pulled the wool over their eyes. But we could not have done it without the entire International Disability Caucus. It was, it was because they, the governments were not able in a human rights treaty to separate out one group and say, oh, everyone else has rights, but this group doesn't. It just didn't make any sense. And that's why I realized right from the beginning that this was going to work. It was just a matter of how, because either the convention wasn't going to be adopted or it was going to be what we wanted. And it happened very fast. That convention, the negotiations, I think, only took 5 years. It's unheard of for a UN convention to be negotiated in that time. And a lot of credit goes to the ambassador from New Zealand, Don Mackay was his name, who chaired he was brought in. First, the chair was a gentleman from Ecuador named Gallegos, and he was very good, but they realized this was going to take years under his leadership, and it was too expensive to keep bringing in all these activists from all over the world. We met every 6 months for 2 weeks at the UN. It was just unfathomable to let it go on for years. So they brought Mackay in, and I think Mackay, I'm not sure about this, but I think he is one of the chief negotiators at the Security Council. The man is a genius, and he pulled it off. We all pulled it off. It was amazing. So now we have it. And now what do we do with it? That's the next big question, because in the US, it's really hard, as we all know. Things are going backwards, but, as fast as it's just shocking what's going on here, how bad things are. And this was before Trump. This has nothing to do with Trump. Has been coming for a long time. So how do we this is what comes next. This is why I'm on the board, joined the board of Mind Freedom. I want to help figure out what do we do next. But at least we have the convention. We have the words on a piece of paper that under international law, forced psychiatry is illegal. It's huge.
You're making me think about the PAMI Act, because that was something that I read like through and through, and I thought about, none of this is actually happening, and why is that interpretation? And so I think that there's legal leverage when you have it in the way you do, and like you said, it's international, right? And so we need to be asking the hard questions of why would there not even be, they've abolished guardianship in Mexico. Are we really that behind America? That we really want to keep power and control that desperately? I think there's some larger conversations, and so I think you're right. What do we do with it now? Um, I can share that in the presentation I gave yesterday at this conference, I did include um, all the information on the CRPD, and it was a first time education for many. Well, I would say about uh, at least 2/3 of the room. And we had a room of, I think it was about 450. So that's great. And I got a lot of follow-up questions on that. So I think it's also about getting this information out there. So I'm with you, Jim. I'm glad with this is being recorded. I hope to share it with other organizations, um, and a lot of the peers, let's say, that are starting to work within the system that don't even have an awareness of rights. So, um, Jim, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to,
Yeah.
if anybody else wants to talk, I'll defer, but, I mean, it seems to me in the US, you know, we need to get it ratified. And that's proven hard. And without the RUDs, as I understand it, basically, well, anyway, in the US, it's so arrogant that basically people say, oh, we don't do it, we already comply with it, which is a joke. But the other thing, the main thing I actually wanted to say is you can just use it. I mean, I put in the chat, which I'm sure people would be shocked if I didn't at some point, the report on improving mental health outcomes. And we cite to it, fairly extensively, what it provides and stuff, and make the point that forced psychiatry, psychiatric imprisonment, forced drugging, and electroshock is a violation of international law. Tina educated me to the truth that people actually in the US actually don't get to enforce international law, that individuals don't get to say, oh, my rights under this international treaty that the US may be a party to are being violated. But I think still it provides pretty good, it's a pretty good argument to say it's a violation of international law.
I agree with that. And I would also like to follow up on what David said about making friends. And Celia was very good at that, but a lot of us are good at that. And one of the ways, I didn't go into this whole story, but the US was standing opposed to even having a convention in the very beginning. I think it was US, Egypt, Pakistan, China, possibly Canada. I can't remember. There were 5 countries that didn't want the convention at all. And part of what I did while I was at the UN was make friends with the US delegation. And this was under the W. Bush administration. So the State Department officials, the Department of Justice lawyers who were there were all people who had been there under the previous administrations, under Clinton, and who were really good people and really cared about human rights. But they were muzzled by their superiors because the whole point of them being there was to make sure there was nothing in the convention that supported abortion rights. That's what all they cared about, the W. Bush administration. So that's part of why we were also able to succeed, because we made friends with these people. They were on our side. And I don't know what they all did behind the scenes, but I know that they worked because the US in the end decided not to block the convention. And the US could have. It had to be consensus in the General Assembly to approve it. And the US was going to block, but they didn't. So this concept of making friends with people and educating people go hand in hand. It's not one, it can't be one without the other. Just having friends doesn't help. They need to really understand why it's a human rights abomination to force psychiatry on people. And we have to tell our stories. So everything that Mind Freedom has been doing for all these years is all going in the right direction. And like I said, the revolution has begun. We're not going to win in my lifetime. I mean, it's my dream that we will, but I'm not expecting it. But it's a revolution underway. And Martin Luther King talked about it. David talked about it. Also, the creative maladjustment stuff that King talked about. We're on the way, but it's bumpy. The main thing, in my opinion, for the future, we all have to pull in the same direction. We all
So
have to
what are
work
the
together,
so what are the
all of us.
tangible things we can do rather than just talking about it? What are
Great
the things we as an audience can
question.
do? Specific things that we can do.
Well, I'm just going to say from the beginning, first of all, we need to know what's in the convention. I mean, we can't use the convention as a basis for this revolution if we don't know about it. So we need to inform other people about it. And I'm very grateful again for this opportunity. So that's something we can keep doing. That's easy to talk about. To actually make these friends. Cross disability, in my opinion, is the way to go. And again, David talked about this before, so this is not just my idea. We're all on the same page here. But we absolutely have to get involved with independent living centers, and we have to build allies with the autistic community, with trans people, across all these barriers. We have to make ourselves visible and known. And the only way this is going to work is if we all start pulling together in the same direction and stop fighting with each other.
I don't know. I think there's a lot less of that, to be very transparent. I think it looks very different now. It actually surprised me. Some people that maybe in the movement would have been advocating for better services is definitely thinking, we need to go, we need to align and come back together and actually fight for rights. And so I am feeling very encouraged, and I want to, I'm going to repeat, I feel it was exciting to actually share about the CRPD to peers that have never actually heard anything about it. And so you're absolutely right. Sharing that information is huge. Maybe the next generation, the youngers, are going to be able to know how to take up and actually enact it. We can only hope and pray, and I believe it. But I do think that rights are a core dialogue right now, and absolutely cross disability, um, coming together, uniting as, it comes down to, like Martin Luther King said, um, a injustice for one is an injustice for all, and now more than ever, we need to be really drawing together.